Further, verse 12, God says about Ishmael, he'll be a wild ass of a man, his hand will be against everyone, everyone's hand will be against him, and he'll live to the east of all his brothers. It's exactly fulfilled in the case of the Arabs today, living to the east of the Jews, and their hand is against everyone and everyone's hand is against them. A picture of terrorism. Verse 13. Then she called the name of the Lord, who spoke to her, Thou art a God who sees. For she said, Have I even remained alive here after seeing him? It was not only Abraham who got a vision of God, Hagar. There is no record in the Bible that Sarai ever got a vision of God or ever met with God personally. But Hagar did. It's interesting, isn't it? God met with Hagar, and there's no instance that God met with Sarah. And Hagar said, Thou God dost see me. Now it's a question of how we interpret that verse, that phrase. I think it means something very similar to what Job said in Job 23:15. He knows every detail of what is happening to me. God, you're a God who sees me and who knows every detail of what is happening to me. You know the affliction I'm going through under Sarah. And yet, you've told me to go and submit to her. I go. You saw me in the wilderness when I was helpless. You know everything I'm going through. Do you have that faith? He knows every detail of what's happening to me. Thou God sees me. Therefore the well was called Bir Lahai Roy, the well of the living one who sees me, between Kadesh and Bered. And so Hagar bore a son, and Abraham called the name of his son whom Hagar bore Ishmael. And Abraham was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. Now this is the product of the law. And as we have seen before, what is the next verse? Abraham was 99 years old and the Lord appeared to him. Notice that? What is the gap between those two verses? Chapter 17:1 and chapter 16:16. 13 years of silence. 13 years of Abraham's confidence in himself being broken down. 13 years of thinking that Ishmael is the promised seed. 13 years of living in an imaginary victory and discovering finally that it's not the real thing. 13 years of living under the law, struggling, determining. Long period. God kept the Jews under the law for 1500 years before Jesus came. 1500 years. And then the new covenant was established. And in all of our experience, God takes us through this old covenant period to teach us one very important lesson. And that is, you can do nothing by yourself. What Jesus said in John 15:5, without me you can do nothing. It's easy to quote that verse, easy to put it up on a wall, but it can take 13 years to learn it. A little less perhaps if we are more wholehearted, and a little longer if we are less wholehearted, and if we are not so wholehearted, perhaps never in our whole life. That we can live and die under the law. Never having an Isaac, only an Ishmael. A form of godliness. Ishmael is the form of godliness, without the power, without the reality, only a form. The law looks good, impresses others. Abraham can take his little boy and say, this is the promised seed. I've got victory. Romans 6:14 is fulfilled in my life. And yet it's an Ishmael. And you know that. In your secret life, in your thought life, in your private life, it's not too good. And those are all little whispers of God, little indications that you haven't got Isaac yet. Listen to that voice. Let God break you. Very important. And that takes time. And the mark of a broken man is that he doesn't get offended. That he never is proud of any victory he has. If you get victory over anger and you're proud of it, My brother, sister, you can be 100, 200% certain that that is an Ishmael. If you get victory over sexual lust or love of money or anything, and you're proud of it, you can be 1,000% sure that that's an Ishmael. Or if you can gloat over the fact that you're superior to another brother, you can be sure whatever you've got, it's an Ishmael. A broken man is just not like that. We can call this the Genesis 16 verse 17 period of Abraham's life. Genesis 16 verse 17 is a blank verse, 13 empty years. And we need to go through this Genesis 16 verse 17 period in our life, where all our confidence in ourselves is shattered, where all our pride over the little victories we have got is shattered, where all our gloating over how superior we are to somebody else is shattered, where all our confidence in our discernment, other people don't have discernment like I have, is shattered. Sometimes I've seen that also, that a brother can think, yeah, I've got some discernment here. Not like some of these other dumb people in our church. I've got some discernment. It goes pretty slow with such brothers. Usually pretty slow. They are good brothers, but it could have gone much better if they had been a little humbler. But they are in Genesis 16 verse 17. May they come out of it quickly. May we all come out of it quickly. So the Lord can appear to us and say, I'll give you the real victory now. But we have to be broken. Someone has said that there are 3 stages in any work that God does. The first stage is difficult. The second stage, it is impossible. And then the third stage, it is done. Difficult, impossible, and done. You understood that? That's foolishness to the natural mind. In the world it is difficult, impossible, then it can never be done. But God doesn't go from difficult to done because man can get the glory. I did it. It was difficult, but I managed it. But God has to lead man from the difficult to the impossible stage. Then only He can do it so that the man doesn't glory. You see, at the age of 86, Abraham could still have a son, but Sarah couldn't. At the age of 99, neither Abraham nor Sarah could have. Abraham couldn't have a son even if he wanted, even if he married 10 more wives. And then, when it was impossible, at 86 it was difficult, but at 99 it was impossible. God said, now you're ready. See, this is the principle in God's dealings with all of His servants. Moses, at the age of 40, he was like Abraham at 86. I'm capable. I have been trained in the military academy in Egypt, and I have lived got the highest education. And Egypt, by the way, was the most advanced country in the world in those days. Like people talk about going to America nowadays, people used to talk about going to Egypt to get higher education. The best education in the world. And living in Pharaoh's palace at the age of 40, the smartest young man in the whole of Egypt, he says, if there's a man who can deliver God's people, it's me. And he saw an Egyptian hitting an Israelite, and he smote that Egyptian and buried him under the sand. That was his power. And he had to run away. And then God took him into another university. It's quite different from the universities of Egypt. It was a university in the wilderness of looking after sheep, living in his father-in-law's house. That can be a problem when you have to live in your father-in-law's house. And broke him and broke him and broke him. This proud prince of Egypt, living as a helpless son-in-law in his father-in-law's house, looking after sheep, broke him, till at the age of 80, he says, Lord, I'm not the man. I can't do this job. And he's broken now. Now it has become impossible. Now God says, you're ready. Moses, you're ready. At the age of 40, you were not ready. You were too full of yourself and your discernment and your sharpness and your cleverness. Now you're ready. You are really broken. Now I can take you and do something through you that I could never do through you when you were 40 years old. There's a lesson there. We learn exactly the same with Abraham and with Moses and with all of God's people. Think of proud Saul of Tarsus, how God had to break him, blind his eyes. And it's very significant that he got a brother called Ananias to come and lay his hands on Paul so that he could be healed and be filled with the Spirit. It was not some apostle like Peter or James, just an ordinary brother. We'd like an apostle to come and lay hands on our head. God says, you humble yourself. I'll send an ordinary brother to you called Ananias. He'll come and do the job. You're just a nobody, Paul. Ananias is good enough for you. No need to send Peter for somebody like you. Ananias is good enough. Peter is sent for people like Cornelius, humble people. But for proud, arrogant Saul, Ananias. Put them down. Put them down. Make them small in their own eyes. And then he was sent away for 3 years to the wilderness. It says he was in Arabia, Paul, Galatians chapter 1. And there he was broken in 3 years. And got out of his head all the garbage he accumulated from Professor Gamaliel in the Bible school. He spent 3 years with Gamaliel in the Bible school, and he had to spend 3 years in Arabia to unlearn all that. And whatever number of years he spent in the Bible school, he had to go to Arabia and unlearn all that before he could be useful. All that has to be taken out. All that human cleverness and wisdom. Till you are broken, that you don't despise anyone, you don't think you're so sharp and so discerning, and despise the other gullible people in the assembly or any such thing. And then God can do a mighty work through you. And we know that in Moses' case, when he was 40, he could bury only one Egyptian under the sand. And when he was 80, broken man, weak, he could bury the whole Egyptian army under the Red Sea. Not in his strength now. One man was with his muscles, but the whole Egyptian army was with God's power. And there is a lesson. There's a lesson. We can learn all these beautiful illustrations, and as we have often seen, illustrations don't bring us to reality. They show us that there is a principle in God's dealings with us. If we can learn that and say, Lord, do that work in me, then we have achieved something. Has God broken you, brother, sister? You know it very well if you don't despise anybody anymore. If you despise people, you can be pretty sure you're still in Genesis 16, 17. If you're proud of some victory you got, you're still in Genesis 16, 17. If you think you're capable to do this, that, and the other, you're still in Genesis 16, 17. If you think you can do things better than the way that brother does it, you are very much in Genesis 16, 17. You can speak better than that brother, and you can organize things better than this brother. You can do this, that, and the other. Yeah, you can keep on like that. May you come out of Genesis 16, 17 soon. There is so much of this which prevents God's people from going on. And I believe at the judgment seat of Christ we shall discover how many Christians were stuck in Genesis 16, 17 all their lives, even though many who heard about the new and living way, because they never allowed God to break them. Every defeat you have, let God humble you through it. Every time you see you slip up and fall in your private life, let God humble you through it. When you have a dirty dream, what's your reaction to it? Oh God, how filthy the flesh is. Let God humble you. When you have a dirty dream to show you that you are really nothing, instead of being so puffed up and thinking that you are somebody. My brothers and sisters, I emphasize this because I've come to see through the years that this is the number one reason why many believers never make spiritual progress in their life, and why God cannot accomplish anything through them. Why their lives are so dried up, their ministry is so dried up, because God's never been able to break them. They are too proud, too high up in their own thinking, with all their outward manifestation of humility, which is all a counterfeit. Inwardly they are not broken. They've got high thoughts about themselves, covered with a cloak of humility. Counterfeit hypocrisy. May God penetrate through all that and show us that we need to be broken. And then He can do something for us. I want you to turn to a verse in Psalm 107. Psalm 107 we read verse 12 and 13. Therefore God humbled their heart with labor. They stumbled and there was none to help. You see, they come to the place where there's nobody to help them. We can say they came to a 0 point. Then, notice this then they cried out to the Lord, and He saved them out of their distress. Verse 18. Verse 17. Fools, because of their rebellious way, because of their iniquities, are afflicted with sickness. Their soul abhorred all kinds of food. They can't eat food properly. And they drew near to the gates of death. Then, when they are humbled sufficiently, they come almost to death. Then they cried out to the Lord. He saved them out of their distresses. Verse 27. Speaking about those who are out at sea, they reeled and staggered like a drunken man. And look at this phrase. They were at their wits' end. They came to the end of themselves, not knowing what to do. Then they cried to the Lord and He brought them out. What is the message in all this? We have to come to our wits' ends. We usually don't learn to turn to the Lord before that. Till then, we depend on other people or on our own cleverness, and God allows that 13 years to go by. Blank, Genesis 16:17. Blank verse. What's going on? God's humbling us. But it's not God's will that we should be there so long. We should come out quickly. We have to go. All of us have to go through it for a period, but not for so long. Time is so short. We have to come out of it quickly. Humble yourself under the mighty hand of God in such situations, and don't despise His dealings.